Welcome to Inspiring Entrepreneurs, the podcast that delivers wisdom and valuable advice directly from Canadian business leaders. My name is Dan Delmar of TNKR Media.
And my name is Michael Newton from BDO Canada.
Happy holidays, Mike. It's our Retail Spectacular.
Happy holidays to you and your family, too. This year, it all seems to fall in the same time. So Hanukkah and Christmas all falling together this year for what is a little bit of a rare occasion. We don't very often get things lining up that well. So we can wish everybody happy holidays at the exact same time this year.
Exactly. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, whatever you're celebrating. Enjoy the holiday season. Merry Grindamus if you're in entrepreneurship. That's what they call it in tech, Mike. They call it Grindamus because you're grinding away while everyone else is enjoying their turkey and fanfare.
Yeah, like the old Seinfeld episode and Festivus. So everybody's got their own take. Okay? So long as it works, so long as it brings you and your family together and you have a good time, then that's really much everything that this is all about.
So happy Festivus to those who are celebrating. Today on the show, we have Dax Dasilva of Lightspeed and Myriam Belzile-Maguire of Maguire Shoes. So we have a point of sale system and a major retailer for our Retail Spectacular, Mike. Generally speaking, before we were going into this Christmas period, the Canadian government was going to give us a tax break. They were going to ship off about $250 to most Canadians. That $250 is now off the table as per the last budget update. Not delivered by Chrystia Freeland, who's no longer finance minister. We'll get there in a second. But first, as we introduce our retail topic, spending. Is retail spending up? Is consumer confidence up right now during the holiday season?
I'm not sure where anything stands right now. I've never seen so much confusion in everybody's mind. Everybody wants to be excited. Everybody wants to be happy for the holiday season. I think, somewhere between what's going on in the rest of the world from a disruption, call it war, call it whatever the scenario is, there's just so much pain out there. I think that's discouraging people, and there's no doubt that, as you watch and I'll call it banter for lack of using a term that I don't want to use on air, between Mr. Trump and Mr. Trudeau and everything else that's going on at this point, it's leaving people with a lot of big question marks as we roll into the season. No doubt that, online continues to surpass retail sales. If you happen to drive by the shall we call them the suburbia malls, so Promenade Saint-Bruno, Galerie d'Anjou, you're going to see large lineups, Fairview. You're going to see lineups to get in, which is nice to see. I'm not sure how much everybody's spending when they actually go in at this point. I think there's still just a lot of unknown at this point.
So our two guests, Dax Dasilva, he's had some challenges in terms of facing stiffer competition. He was an innovator in the point of sale system space, those fancy terminals that you started seeing in retail, not just the regular boxy Interact machines, but these very stylish designed terminals. That was part of the innovation that Lightspeed pushed through. They're now facing more competition, so it might be a grind miss for Dax. On the other side, Myriam Belzile-Maguire of Maguire Shoes, she's opening one more store in Brooklyn, and she's finding that the balance between online and retail is maybe skewing a bit more towards retail than she would have thought. She's had better luck with retail lately, and that seems surprising.
Yeah, but I think what we're seeing is this trend, is this moving away from some of the downtown shopping. So as she'll explain to us, some of the focus on Manhattan in-person shopping, which I think we're also seeing in the downtown Montreal area. Let's face it, it's a disruption for people to get into the city these days. I mean, you look at the orange cones of Montreal, you look at the street closures, you look at the construction going on everywhere, you look at parking costs. It's really not a huge encouragement for people to come downtown. So I think that's what we're starting to see. I mean, obviously Brooklyn is blossomed and boomed in the last few years. Again, taking away from what used to be a downtown Manhattan, Saks Fifth Avenue, window fronts and FAO Schwartz and all the rest of it. I mean, times have changed, and I think we're going to continue to see that.
Let's get to the big news in Canadian economics. The finance minister, she's been in place since 2020. She quit cabinet amid leadership rumors, disassociating herself from Trudeau's economic, and I quote, gimmicks. A very stinging letter that is obviously causing a lot of uncertainty. Dominic LeBlanc, a longtime member of Parliament, is now the new finance minister of Canada.
Trudeau basically advised Friedland that she was being shuffled and that she was no longer going to be finance minister. So instead of taking a new job within the government, she resigned. I hate to say this, and whether you liked Chrystia Friedland or not, I almost say is irrelevant in this discussion. I mean, to a certain degree, I think she's become the scapegoat in what is an ugly budgeting scenario. A and B. I mean, here's a woman who has been loyal and has been the confidant of Trudeau for the last at least 4 years. And as he continues to tread water, albeit not that well, he's looking to make changes to shuffle things up. And what I can only imagine is a last-ditch effort to gain something. But, clearly there's a lot more going on here, and there's been a lot of calls for his resignation as prime minister. This is also the 9th cabinet minister to resign in a short period of time. It says a lot about the uncertainty and the instability of what's going on in Ottawa right now. And I think there's a lot of people very concerned about what comes next.
We will be taking a few weeks off the show to work on our pivot to podcasting and to come back with a bit of a different formula, but we will be back in a few weeks. By that time, in January, is Justin Trudeau still prime minister? I honestly don't know. My guess would be he is.
No, and I don't think anything's going to happen over the next few weeks anyways. I mean, it was the last sitting when he announced everything this week. So, clearly that's, I'm not sure when they reconvene, but they're certainly not going to reconvene for a few weeks. So I don't think anything's going to happen. I don't think the media is going to pressure him into stepping down. Our new format that we're going to go to, Dan, is, I kind of look forward to it because, as I was taking notes for today's show, one of my highlights was Trump trashes Friedland, invites Trudeau to be 51st governor. I'm like, wow, there's a topic we could go on for a little while and clearly not win a lot of friends in the conversation, but certainly have a lot of fun with what this looks like. There's no doubt right now that Canada is on its heels. Trump is intimidating, doing his best, basically saying that, he almost supports Trudeau's decision that Friedland didn't have the support and she wasn't doing a good job. And, at this point, any kudos he's given to Trudeau it's got to come at a price somewhere. I just don't trust that anything that, is that positive in Trudeau's mind doesn't come with a bigger plan. And is that to be the 51st governor? Well, I think we're far away from that at this point, but it'll make for some interesting conversation.
I really don't like the governor jabs. It is not only uncivilized, but it's from a diplomatic point of view, it's disrespectful to a country's sovereignty and maybe seen as a coded message to others who may be disrespectful of our sovereignty. So I do think it's a very serious issue. And I should give credit to Jean Charest, the former premier of Quebec, who's made some comments in recent days, taking it very seriously and noting how it seems like he's always wanted Canada to get closer to Europe, to hedge against that U.S. hegemon. But he seems to think that a more diversified economy is safer in the long term.
Europe has its own issues too at this point, but look, if I don't laugh, I cry. So when you hear me make the comment about a governor in a lighthearted tone, it's because I don't want to accept that maybe Trump has some truth to it, and my bigger concern in that is when you watch his love of dictators around the world and how they like to gobble up land that is not theirs and move into those spaces. It's I'm not gonna lie that it does cross my mind when I hear Trump say 51st governor that he's looking to fulfill his ego and his territory on anything else. I mean, and that you can't avoid thinking that, but I just can't. Maybe I don't want to, but I just can't see that happening.
One of Jean Charest's points, I think, which was interesting, was that we should be using this occasion to diversify our economy and try to stand up for ourselves and for ourselves as an economy more often. And Trump's comments have to do with the trade imbalance, really, because he can only think in terms of dollars coming in and out. So he feels that a trade imbalance signals that we should become subservient to the United States or something. It's not that we have all this supply, it's that we're we have to work for them. That's his attitude, I think. So in that sense, perhaps it's best that we try to work for ourselves a little more.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that Trump has been notorious for is finding a weakness and driving it forward. And he is clearly perceiving a weakness in the Trudeau government right now, and he is playing it to the nth degree. And you're 100% right. We need to stand up for ourselves. We need to address our own concerns. We need to create a strong political background right now. And when you see a bully, you look at a weakness, like a kid in high school who sees somebody that has something a little different about them, and they drive all over it. Well, essentially, that's what we're looking at here, and it's quite clear that the Trudeau government is not seen as having strength, and he's going to play it all he can.
Now, speaking of economic recovery, how to take industries and supercharge them, let's check in, Mike, on Quebec's electric transition. It's an interesting industry because we have a head start. I mean, Quebec has been powered by green energy, electricity for decades now, and we nationalized it. And are we capitalizing on it? Well, let's see. These are actual CTV News headlines on the electric transition from just one 24-hour period this week. Brace yourself, Mike. Quebec passes bill to ban gas car sales by 2035. Okay. Quebec electric vehicle subsidies to be suspended in 2025. Okay. Lion Electric to file for creditor protection. Northvolt, already under creditor protection, denies that contaminants are leaking from Quebec's site. Mike, that's just in like a span of a day. First, let's pick apart the fact that they're going to ban gas car sales officially now by 2035, but they're taking away the incentives.
I have not been sold on the electric capacity of vehicles based on our lack of infrastructure and everything else that needs to be built. So I kind of see some of this in play. I think we're eventually going to see either hydrogen power or nuclear power that's going to replace the electric power when it comes to vehicles. It makes me wonder what that means behind the scenes at this point when you look at all of these things. I mean, they're contradictory, right? I'm going to tell you, well, we don't want to see another gas car, but hey, we're going to stop supporting the growth. Like, have they felt that they've done enough work here and they've subsidized enough, and it's time for an industry to stand on its own? Yeah, it's going to be very difficult for Quebec as one industry, as such a big player to stand on its own in a world that is, really pushing electric right now. So I think that there's a risk there. But I do think it makes me wonder if we're going to start seeing subsidies and our encouragement for different types of power sources going forward.
The other aspect of this are the subsidies we're giving to those in electric vehicle businesses. Lion Electric here in the Laurentians was heavily subsidized, now under creditor protection. And, that to me is an example, and people in Quebec media have been writing this, including in La Presse, of how government subsidies can actually render a business less competitive and less able to take on competition internationally. Have you been watching the Lion story, and what do you make of this unfortunate turn?
Well, I'm not going to direct this at Lion because I honestly don't know enough about the story, but I will give you my opinion on the subsidy side of things. I mean, we've been watching subsidies very heavily going back many years, and I can think of the tech industry going back into 1995 to 2000 in terms of all of the support that was coming between R&D tax credits and so many other things, where Quebec has always led the way in the ultimate inspiration, if you will, entrepreneurial side. And we continue to see it with our guests, that ability to spawn off new businesses and new technologies, and Quebec has been great. That's the positive. The negative is when it goes on too long, I've watched companies stay on a lifeline way longer than they should have, and ultimately at the end of the day, then the shall we call it the natural selection of business is one that needs to survive on its own. It needs to be able to have risk management. It needs to be able to make a decision. It can't survive on a lifeline unless it's an industry of its that has a different place in the community. But you're not going to take a competitive industry and subsidize somebody all the way through. It's no way. And I think what ends up happening, unfortunately, and again, this is not directed at the specific cases you're talking about, but I've watched bad management and lazy management over the years become demotivators to excel and improve because they were living off an awful lot of this money. And, what we see often is a lot of the bigger companies let the small companies live off of subsidies. They get the direct side, and then the big companies that are going to move in don't want to do the R&D necessarily. They're going to let the little guys do it, and then they're going to buy them out. So the ones that end up floundering from a management perspective but have a solid technology and their IP protected, these are the ones that become the targets for the larger corporations. So it does become a feeder system, a little bit like the Montreal Expos became for years, and the feeder system for Major League Baseball. We end up creating that environment based on subsidies.
And if you're subsidizing an innovator with a supply chain that is of benefit to Canadians, okay, you can make the argument, but at a certain point, are you still innovating by putting batteries in school buses, is my question. And I don't know what happened there. Again, I'm not commenting online either. But you do have to ask the question, they must have at some point faced much bigger, much stiffer competition as everything became electrified. I mean, Tesla's making semi-trucks, for God's sake. So I don't think it takes any kind of unique combination of Canadian talent to produce a school bus with a battery in it.
No, and I think you have to look at, you're looking at this economically. You look at the graph, right? And obviously the return associated with the subsidies needs to outweigh and support the risk that you're incapable of creating certain products or certain processes on your own until such time as you hit the right level. Problem is, a lot of companies don't ever hit that right level. And it's like you said, where's that inspiration? I mean, if you're going to go bankrupt tomorrow morning, or you're going to have a hard time tomorrow morning, and you can see far enough ahead, you need to adjust your plan. If the government continues to support it, then I dare say it becomes another branch of the government, which falls into bureaucracy and not always the greatest business decisions at the end of the day.
Why not produce lightweight electric pickup trucks so that people can actually go to work the next morning and find some jobs and propel the economy in those tiny little different ways? So what we're subsidizing and the things that might actually themselves contribute to the economy should be a factor as well, not just whatever cool new technology exists.
No, we should be inspiring innovation. We should be, supporting and subsidizing growth. We should be in a position where this is all about moving forward. The moment it isn't, then the redeployment of assets and from a government perspective needs to be addressed and needs to be adjusted accordingly.
Speaking of innovation, or maybe not innovating, depending on your perspective here, public servants pushing back on hybrid work mode. So we talked about this early in September. A lot of public offices, federal government offices, were going from 2 days in person to 3. So from a minority of days to a majority of days. Obviously, some people not having it, including one woman interviewed by CTV News who says, well, look, she's doing like an hour and a half commute to go to the call center in Longueuil for Service Canada to sit in front of a computer and put a headset on and answer calls. So she's like, is this really necessary? Like, why can't I just do that from home? In this particular case, if it's a call center type of operation, in an era where we're supposed to be ideally providing for more real estate development, getting some action going, why not lighten up on the government facilities and have more people work from home if they're in situations like this where it doesn't seem to matter if she's in person?
Dan, you know where I can go with this topic. I'm a firm believer of in-office and teams and culture and working together. And when I say teams, I don't mean teams meetings. I mean actually putting teams together to work and cooperate together. I get the scenario. I find the scenario, unfortunately, very narrow-minded, maybe is the wrong term. But it's all about today. It's not about what are we creating going forward. And I see it a lot with the younger people coming into the workforce today. Those that, either came in pre-COVID or just pre-COVID or around COVID, the skill sets associated with relationship building, the skill sets associated with building and watching culture, and we are all accepting today that when we want to stay home, that we are happy to work from home because it's about us. And it's not about building teams. It's not about managing. So the moment we can create an environment where we learn to manage people and create culture and move things forward, then maybe I'm going to be a little more amenable to the conversation. But my problem right now is I think our culture is suffering, our relationship skills are suffering. Yeah, there's certainly some industries, and maybe a call center is a really good example of one that the culture doesn't necessarily matter so long as you've got your programming down. But I got to tell you, in professional offices and even retail, it's all about people. Where's the service going to go when we learn that it's so much easier for me to sit in sweatpants and answer a phone from home than it is to actually work on a team? And this is where I have a big problem. And yes, I know I'm a dinosaur. And yes, I know you and I are different generations. And I'm doing this from the office in a dress shirt with cufflinks. And, you're doing from a home studio. And is there a right or wrong? No. But I just have a hard time saying that we are not suffering as a culture from the inability for people to work together and cooperate together, that it's not going to have some kind of price 5-10 years down the road.
I have never walked into my studio in sweatpants. I don't even own more than a couple pairs of sweatpants. Just want to FYI.
I wasn't implying you were wearing sweatpants. I said the people that put on sweatpants to go to work.
Because you can be professional and remote, although you do have to have an office area in your home. I stress this so much. If you're going to be remote, and I've been remote since I was a freelancer, you still have to get up, get dressed, do your routine, commute. I tell this to people. You have to actually commute, even if that commute is within your own home. It used to be upstairs to a little loft area a couple years ago. Now it's moving downstairs to a small little studio. Here I see, in this case, I'm not going to say her last name. The woman's name is Christine. She was spoken to by CTV News. I'll share the pic with you here. You can see on her setup, she's got her computer screen and her Government of Canada portal and her mouse and her headset. But then off to the side, there's like the Dyson vacuum over there. She's got a pile of laundry. There's some boxes in the corner. You have to be in the right mental mindset to be able to separate yourself from the screaming baby and the dogs upstairs right now. But also your immediate office area, very, very important. It can't feel like a corner of your house. Even if there's crazy stuff behind you, in your immediate visual area, it should look like something of a workplace, in my opinion.
I totally agree, Dan. And I like to bug you on this topic because I know we see it a bit differently. To me, it revolves around professionalism, and whether that professionalism is a lawyer, an accountant, or a doctor, or whether that professionalism is at a call center, if you can maintain that sense of professionalism and you can do what you need to do, then I guess you could argue either way. Again, my concern lies is what does that mean to the kids that should be coming into our industries that we're going to support going forward? And I think that's where a lot of it is going to be lacking. And I can play pseudo psychologist here, and I wonder what this is going to have from a mental health concern going forward if people are not getting out and working. And remember, we went from 5 days to 2 to maybe 3. I mean, it's still a relative compromise in the grand scheme of things that allows us to work together with people and still not have to do the commute and not have to go through all of that. I have a hard time on that pushback. Do I think we're ready to go back to 5 days? No. Would I like us to be? Sure. But we're not there. We're certainly not there. I think we're very capable of doing 3 and finding a happy medium in terms of how to manage those situations.
So I'm looking at Christine, the Service Canada worker, on the CTV News story now with the pile of laundry next to her. And I'm thinking, well, if I was calling Christine and talking to Revenue Canada, Service Canada, whatever, exchanging sensitive information, would that site, like knowing what her quote unquote workplace is, would that bother me? I had to think about that for a while, and maybe not, but I also don't think it's great for Christine herself. Like, it's probably not optimal for the worker. But some people would argue that we're just being kind of superficial here, and that we're distracted by the pile of laundry that I can't stop staring at right now.
I saw this on TV as well, so I didn't need to see the visual you put up on the screen. I did see it. Are we being superficial? Yeah, to a certain degree, probably we are. I think we're brought up with our way of seeing the world and what that means. And would I put laundry in a Dyson vacuum in my office, in a downtown office? Probably not. But does that mean that she's any less efficient or any less good at what she does? No. And this is where the argument starts to heat up is, where are you drawing the line on the curve and saying the efficiency and the efficacy of what we're doing is hindered or hurt by the fact that we are maybe working with a pile of laundry in the corner. And you can argue that's a fair statement, but I think you have to look deeper into this. And, what are you training a generation? Like, if you look at somebody who's worked for 30 years or 35 years, and towards the end, they want to work from home because they don't want to commute, they're finding that, they did the slog for 30 years. You know what? I can get that. They've also learned professionalism. They've also learned what they're supposed to be working for. How do you take a kid who's starting an industry and that's what you're going to teach them? That's their view of professionalism. That's their view of what tomorrow should be like. And I think on a long-term basis, we're going to have some societal, cultural issues in that. And the dialogue is one that is very interesting when you look at it from perspective and age. A person who wants to continue to work and has had 25, 30 years experience, you know what? Good for them. They still want to contribute. They still want to be part of things. The judgment isn't the same. I got a bit of a problem at, 22, 23 years old, and living like that and not getting out to be part of a team, because at that point, it's only one person that counts, and that's you, and you.
Mike, let's get to our retail spectacular with Dax Dasilva of Lightspeed, the point of sale system, and Myriam Maguire of Maguire Shoes. They both have a lot going on over the holiday season and important goals over the next few weeks. We'll check in with them next. Dax, welcome back to Inspiring Entrepreneurs.
Thanks. So happy to be here.
First, what's new? So you're back leading Lightspeed. Tell us the story there.
Yeah, I've been back at Lightspeed for about 9 months as CEO. Of course, I never really left. I was executive chair of the company, serving in a different capacity for about 2 years, and love serving at the board level. But there's nothing quite like being in the hot seat as the CEO. I think it's interesting because I've done a lot of obviously I've been the founder and the CEO, but I've done lots of different roles within the company or helped different departments. But really being being in that CEO role, I think being two years away, I really appreciate so much the company, the amazing people there, and it's this phase is a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's no doubt, I think, Dax, that the board is one sense of ownership and accountability and
Yeah.
and power, if you will. But there's nothing like being in it. And I think the CEO side of what you're doing is the entrepreneur is okay on the board so long as they've got an outlet for another entrepreneurial side of them.
Yeah.
Hard to live in that environment and feel completely comfortable if you're a true entrepreneur.
I think that is so true. I really love being on the ground, right? And even for the 2 years that I was away from Lightspeed and I did environmental conservation, and film related to the environmental conservation, I went on the ground to all 10 of those projects around the world. Like I really like to be in the mix, and even with the films, I was like on set. And so with Lightspeed, I love to be there. I think the board serves such an important role, but for me, it's too far from the day to day and the action, and I just actually really enjoy that as an entrepreneur.
How has the pandemic been for Lightspeed, and did it make any major pandemic pivots?
Yeah, the pandemic, I think, really brought shone a light on what's powerful about the Lightspeed platform, right? Obviously, we serve a lot of brick and mortar restaurants and retail businesses, And we've been encouraging businesses to light up their digital channels, whether that's delivery in the case of a restaurant, or order ahead and pick up with a restaurant, or when it comes to retail, whether it's the omni-channel shopping, so shopping online, but curbside pickup, these kinds of workflows that unite digital and physical, all of that became a huge priority for everybody during the pandemic. And so the other half of the solution, which really facilitates the digital channels, became extremely important for everybody to light up almost right away. And so we did help our businesses all around the world light up those COVID workflows, but they're actually omni-channel workflows that are really the strong suit of Lightspeed.
This is an update show, so take 30 seconds and just remind everybody exactly what Lightspeed is.
Yeah, so Lightspeed, what we do is we build software that helps those more complex, more sophisticated retail and restaurant customers. Those, typically those that are doing over 500,000 in transaction volume a year. So it might be one of your bike store that's got a lot of inventory. We help them manage the inventory and do the point of sale, or a restaurant that's high volume or has multiple locations in both the cases of retail and restaurant. And so we do that all over the world. We have a very strong retail business here in North America. Our hospitality business is very strong in Europe, and in Asia Pacific. We're selling both platforms.
In terms of trade with the US, what advice would you give to Canadian companies who are nervous about tariffs and about just relations with their American partners in general as we cross into a new administration?
Yeah, I think that our leaders in government really have to, just work as a team, and create that dialogue with the incoming administration. I think we have a lot of common obviously we have a lot of common interests on some of the border concerns that the incoming administration has. And so I think if we're collaborative, and I think that we sort of solve some of those issues in partnership, then we can have a more sensible discussion around trade.
Anybody that walks into the store doesn't necessarily know what Lightspeed is, and right, you're kind of that behind the scenes, even though it affects them directly. What do you see coming up that nobody's going to see but is going to affect what they're doing? Is there anything in the pipeline right now?
Well, there's a lot of AI tools that are being enabled on the side of the merchant. Obviously, what a consumer sees of Lightspeed is probably Lightspeed on the payment terminal, but that's like just almost sort of the endpoint for when a customer buys. But we actually manage all of the business operations for that retail store and restaurant. And if you think about what's happened to retail and restaurant, is that those businesses have gotten so much more complicated over the last ten years. You have to be an expert in social media. You have to be an expert in on e-commerce. You've got to have so much more expertise, and also because of financial pressures like inflation, and staffing challenges since the pandemic, your businesses are always in danger of not being profitable, right? And so I think as Lightspeed integrates tools like AI into insights and analytics capabilities, and also just automate some of the really repetitive, mundane day-to-day tasks. It gives some of that time back to the business owner because they're pretty stretched, right? And ultimately, you didn't open a bike store and you didn't open a Spanish cuisine restaurant because you wanted to sit in your back office administrating Lightspeed. You started those because you have a passion for bikes, you have a passion for Spanish cuisine, and you want to be talking to your guests in the restaurant, or thinking of dreaming up new menu items, or in the case of the bike store, you want to be finding inventory items, curating an amazing new selection for your customers, and doing the things that brought you passion wise into the project. So the more we can take the monotonous, redundant elements out of your day to day with tools like AI and data science and machine learning, all of that, the better for the business. And I think that's what we can do, is help them compete against the big chains, and because we've democratized the technology, but it's also we're trying to give them their time back, so that they can do they can live the passion that they got into that business for.
Is Lightspeed facing more competition than it was a couple years ago since we last spoke?
I think we're a very global player. We have different competitors in every market with every kind of with each different platform. And so I think we've recently decided that we're going to, really focus on the areas where we have almost no competition or a very big competitive moat. For us, that means retail in North America, which is where I started the business when I built the first product for retail, and hospitality in Europe. Those are really, really strong markets. And everything else around the world is a pretty good business, we um, we have we're gonna make those more efficient and keep those customers happy. But the growth areas are the ones where our competitive advantage is huge. And so that's exciting. And just as we go into our 20th year, we just crossed $1 billion in revenue on a trailing 12-month basis. So I think that if we double down in the areas where we have that biggest competitive advantage and that right to win, we have a lot of exciting years ahead.
Do you think at this point, what you're looking at, and from a growth perspective, is this more volume, or is this a changing landscape, or is this something brand new that's coming that you might want to keep under secret, but that it's at least heading our way at some point in the future? I mean, we've taken, I guess, point of sales as almost a given, right? For all as a consumer, you walk into a store, you want to be able to pay. That's the beginning and the end of it. So much has transpired over time, yet. I would say if you ask most people, they'd be like, yeah, there's really nothing more for us to do at this point.
Well, I think there's the point of sale, which is taking payment, which I think is, pretty table stakes. But there's up leveling the whole management of your whole business, right? That's really the we're the operating system, the central nervous system of these businesses. We are in enterprise terms, we're kind of an ERP, but a light ERP because we serve the more complex segment of merchants, the ones with medium to high complexity. So they can't just get away with using a payment terminal. They have to implement a system that's going to run the operations of the business. And at the end, at the very end, when people make a purchase in their store or at the restaurant, then there's the payment piece, the point of sale piece. But it's really the management of the entire business that I don't think a lot of businesses are leveraging fully yet. That and there are a lot of old systems, legacy systems that are, let's say, we serve many retail verticals that are specialized. For example, like jewelry or bike or home and garden or pet or toy and and there's workflows in some of those and suppliers. We integrate with all of their suppliers and brands that nobody else can do for them, right? There's maybe some older software packages, some legacy packages that we're migrating those folks onto Lightspeed and just bringing them into new omni-channel workflows that integrate some of the physical, brick and mortar store or restaurant aspects, but also all the online integrations with social media and also management across multiple stores. So I think that there's a lot of businesses that are still operating on older platforms that we have a lot of opportunity to convert.
Speaking of integrations and democratizing sort of the back end, I'd be remiss if I didn't at least bring up Spotify and the fact that you're both from this area. I mean, what is it in the water? Is there something about the Quebecois spirit that's leading to this sort of disruption that you and Shopify are causing?
There's a lot of technology that's centered in retail and hospitality that has come out of Quebec. I think there is a long history of retail in this province. There's a lot of very big retail brands. Aldo, Le Chateau. There's over the years there's been many. A lot of that heritage comes from the some of the schmata businesses that were very prevalent here in the day. So there's a culture of retail in Montreal, and that's I think a lot of the innovation in retail has come out of that. On the hospitality side, I mean. I travel a lot and I spend a lot of time in restaurants and our food scene here in the city is just world class. It's very hard to find a meal better than what you can have in Montreal. And so I think because of our vibrant chef culture and our food scene, we've had a lot of startups and a lot of technology companies in the hospitality space come out of here and also other parts of Canada. And so I think that when you have a vibrant industry, then you have people in technology trying to solve problems and help those businesses.
So do you have an opinion as to what we need to do to maintain that? I mean, obviously we always, look at this and say there's always politics. There's so many different things that get involved in all of this, Dax. But, the reality is how do we keep that nerve center to our entertainment, to retail, to clothing, to food, to everything that we have built in Quebec, in order to keep that forward so that we keep that next generation local as well?
Yeah, and when I started Lightspeed 20 years ago, there was not much of a tech ecosystem. We had incredible support. Early on, we had amazing grants. There's a couple different organizations at the city, and then as we grew, whether it was BDC or later, some of the pension funds and support in Quebec, we had support all along the way before a real tech ecosystem was built out, and I think maintaining that kind of support, I don't know that that exists everywhere in Canada, but we're quite lucky here if you're a tech startup that we have not just a lot of support at different sizes of your company to access and support that's quite unwavering, but you also now have a tech ecosystem that's quite rich. You've got local VCs like Inovia that are world class. You've got lots of different folks that have built companies that could be mentors. So it's a much better situation. Of course, back in the day, it was also extremely inexpensive to operate here, and of course, costs have come up, but it still is cheaper than other places. In terms of the talent that's here and all the universities, that I think is an amazing natural resource that we have, and being able to start a company here, I think you can do that in a very like kind of optimized way. So that's exciting. Those are elements for why building a company here remains really competitive, and you can experiment and of course you have to iterate and you have to build and test and fail. And the more you can do that, and the more there's like sort of a support system for you to do that, the better.
Dax Dasilva of Lightspeed. So the show is called Inspiring Entrepreneurs. We endeavor to do just that, and we like to check in with our entrepreneurs to see how they're doing and how they're progressing. So we'll ask you the same thing, and I'll play from a couple years ago what your piece of advice for inspiring entrepreneurs was, and let me know how well you think this holds up.
For me, it's focus. The way that I got focus was writing a business plan. We had some early grants, and then we were like forced to write a business plan in order to get our grant. And I was like, oh, I'll never look at this thing again. But we had to submit a 3-year business plan, and that really made me write down on paper what we were actually going to do, because when you're starting a business, there's so many possibilities, there's so many different things you can do, a lot of things to get excited about. But when you write it down and then you write the second piece, which is the spreadsheet part of the 3-year progression, that helps you actually really focus on what you're going to do. And what we actually wrote down in that business plan was still the mission of what we do today. And we were a little bit off on that first year projections, but we hit the second year projections on the nose, and the third year we exceeded it. So a little bit of focus and a little bit of planning at the beginning can really, I think, make the difference and help you not waste time on a lot of distractions.
All right, there you have it, Mike. That's music to your ears, business plans.
Most definitely. It's music to my ears. It's music to my ears as part of the pathway. I don't think it's necessarily music to my ears as being the inspiration to do what we need to do. If the business plan becomes your inspiration, I think you may want to rethink your actual purpose at the end of the day. But it's very interesting because listening to Dax at that point, and he said you've been doing this. This is the 20th year. I dare ask you. Is the piece of advice you gave then the same advice you would have given maybe 5 years in? And has anything changed in any significant manner since either that last show or the beginning? Whether that's a values approach, whether that's the way you handle people, does anything waver in that time frame?
So having come back, and this is a new phase for Lightspeed, is our profitable growth phase. Before, I think the whole market was in a grow phase without the balance of profit. And how do you get to a balance? How do you choose the areas where you're going to grow? Because you're not going to, it doesn't make sense from a profit perspective to try to grow everywhere. That's where we were when I got back, and that whole exercise is about focus, right? It's like choosing your focus, and it's about looking at all the data and really. So it's so funny to hear that because I'm like, oh my God, that's what this whole last 9 months being back has been about, focus. And I think that piece of advice that I gave around the business plan, I think that's a bit of a reaction to seeing a lot of 10 slide pitch decks from entrepreneurs that are excited, but they don't have much more detail than that, and it's and they want to raise money, and I think if you've got a really great solution or idea, I think you need to model that into a business plan in order to really make those decisions of what you're going to say yes to and what you're going to say no to, because there's a lot of ideas when you're starting something, right? And a business plan, even if you have a beautiful 10 slide deck, the business plan actually clarifies how you're going to do it, how you're going to staff it over the course of 3 years, how revenue is going to ramp, how costs are going to ramp. And so it's a clarifying tool that helps you have the focus. And when if as you start to execute, you're really off, then you know, versus your business plan, that you've chosen the wrong focus, and you may need to pivot. So I think the advice is good, and doing that extra work to writing up the business plan. We had to do it because we would not get our grant money if we didn't. So I was required to, I was forced to. And I thought, oh, this is a BS exercise. But having done it, as I said from that clip, it really, really helped us. Really helped us. So don't be skeptical of it, entrepreneurs. Write your business plan. Do your 10 slide deck and make it pretty, but you need more than that.
So it's funny. The one thing I take away from that, when you gave that piece of advice, was not the business plan. I took the focus away
Yeah.
from that. So, that's it's interesting because, it gets depend on how you hear it or how you see it. And I know that's what you mean, but
Clarifying tool. It
100%.
makes you focus, and it tells you what you're doing and where you're saying no.
Exactly.
Dax Dasilva, we'd be remiss if we didn't ask you before the holidays, as a lot of retailers are going to deal with some complications in terms of point of sale systems. There's a GST holiday in effect right now from the federal government. Is it complicated to reprogram if they're on Lightspeed? Is it more complicated in other systems? And is this a lot of time wasting to try to have a sort of a brief tax holiday?
Yeah, so you can either visit our blog for help on that, or you can you can contact support. But yeah, this is configurable inside of Lightspeed. There's a lot of complicated tax laws all over the many states in the US, or the many provinces, and also around the world. So we can handle it. So we'll help you with that. My opinion on it, well, you know what? I mean, the costs have just gone up for folks. And I think that anything that can be done to help folks in this period where there are a lot of financial pressures is a positive.
Dax, I mean, it's interesting, the way Dan phrased it is there's a lot of work for a little bit of an adjustment at the end of the day. But I think this is the ongoing world of what you live in, right? I mean, this is a constant, especially if you're dealing around the world. I mean, you're dealing with nothing is static, everything is fluid, and I think that's an element that is lost on a lot of people. And most people, that you walk into the store and you see, here's what I'm paying for, you just expect it to be right, and that's where you guys, that expertise that you have has to come to the forefront. And I'm assuming that you're facing that in any country you're dealing with.
Yeah, I mean, we are helping simplify the complex for these businesses. They're throwing something like this at the government, and there's a lot, of course, in every state and every province, there's multiple levels of taxation. It's pretty complicated. And then when you ship out of state, because people are doing omni-channel, they're doing e-commerce too, it's a whole different thing. So that's the kind of matrix of complexity of taxation, and that we specialize in helping them be able to get past those issues, to get down to helping develop the promise of their business, right? You can't get bogged down in the administration. That's where we try to make things easier.
Dax Dasilva, great to talk to you again on Inspiring Entrepreneurs. Thanks again for stopping by.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dax.
Myriam Belzile-Maguire is the CEO and co-founder with her sister of Maguire Shoes. Myriam, welcome back to Inspiring Entrepreneurs.
Thank you for having me.
How are you doing? What's new besides this, brand new boutique in Brooklyn?
Yes, so we've been working nonstop on this new store. I was there last weekend and we were able to open on Saturday. We had a great day Saturday in Brooklyn. So we just opened on Barrie, which is really close to Bedford Station in Williamsburg, which is it's become a really important shopping hub in the last few years.
Yes, it's very interesting to see how Brooklyn has evolved in the last, 10 or 12 years. You had a handful, maybe going back 10 years ago, of shall we call it trendy areas, whether that was restaurants or boutiques. Now it's hard to walk through that area without walking into one of them. What has that meant as you guys open? And obviously, being in the right place is where you want to go, but it also comes with a cost.
Yeah, it was really difficult to get a space for us. So to give you an example, we always try to find a space under $10,000 because we know we can pay the employees even on slow months or slow day. So for the size of our business, obviously, and it became really expensive. So Chanel opened 5 minutes from where we are, Hermes, a lot of stores that are backed by VC money. So everything is over $15,000, $20,000. I've seen all prices. So I was on a wait list at my agency, if you want. She put an alarm for any rent that would come up, and there was nothing for 2 years. So we just got a call this summer, and we were able to win the bet with the help of EDC, Export Development Canada. So they help us secure the rent, and that's how we got it.
So two things come to mind with that. First is you're not talking about $10,000 a year. You're talking about $10,000 a month. And what kind of square footage are you talking about?
So what we got was 500 square foot for $8,000. So it's pretty small. So it's the smallest store that we have, but it was important for us to be in this neighborhood to be represented as like a upcoming brand, if you want. And we've got a lot of publicity from just the location itself.
It's interesting though when you say EDC came in and helped support. I think a lot of our listeners would love to understand what that is. Is that a letter of guarantee? Is that how does that work if you need to reach out to somebody like EDC to come along and help you?
Yes, so I was told that the owner of this place would never rent Canadian again because they had a problem with their old Canadian tenant. So for them, the number one thing that was important was to have like a certain amount of a month secure. So with EDC, we were able to give them a letter of credit that would cover 6 months of rent. So in case I didn't pay, for example, then EDC would pay. Which never happened to me in the past. So I'm confident that I won't be losing Canadians' money, but like it just helped to give extra security to the owner.
You got to chuckle. The good news is that the landlord wasn't throwing all Canadians in the same basket by saying that they didn't want to rent to a Canadian again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'll leave that one, Dan. You go to the next question because I'm going to get myself in trouble if I keep talking.
I was going to say, at least someone is working to restore our reputation down south. So thank you, Myriam. About your strategy, last time when we spoke, you wanted to maintain a small number of retail stores, but to have them showcase the online offerings. Were you surprised you'd be doing a second store in New York City?
Yes. So when we look at our stats, we realized that Brooklyn was actually our number one region where we were making the most sell. So even though we have a store on Manhattan, most of the boxes were shipped to Brooklyn, and the numbers of customers we had them was pretty high. So we realized that also in New York, after the pandemic, there's a lot of people working from home. So if you live in Brooklyn, you won't necessarily cross over to Manhattan. You might have friends that live in Brooklyn and cross maybe once a month for a meeting or to meet some friends. So there's a lot of people that live in this area, and there's a lot of nice apartment, and like there's a really strong neighborhood life. So that's why realized that people were opening store there because people don't cross over anymore like as they used to before the pandemic. So, and we felt like that the market, the New York was big enough for a second store. So that's why we decided to do that. And the one of the advantages, my manager, Deborah, that does the New York store, will also take care of the Brooklyn store. So that was also allowing us to do things a bit more quickly than if we would have to find a new person in charge in a new city. So yeah, so that's why we decided to do a second, but I'm not sure I would do a third one. So we're looking for the next US city.
So you were down for the opening. You're down in prime retail, pre-Christmas vibe. How did you find the vibe in Brooklyn? I've heard that downtown New York isn't quite like it used to be before the pandemic. I got a feeling some of it's been shifted out to places like Brooklyn. What's the feeling you're seeing?
Yeah, we're seeing in this neighborhood like a lot of young and trendy people, I would say, which is an interesting customer for us. And there was, I mean, a lot of traffic on the street. The street we're on, the car, they stopped car traffic over the weekend because there's too much people, which was good news for us when we saw that. So the foot traffic is really high. I saw a running club running in front of my store. There was around like 100 people just like running together in front of the store. So for sure, it's an area where there's a lot of foot traffic, even though it's not a mall. It's a shop on the street.
Feeling that I'm getting is that a lot of this has moved. These were people that used to go downtown in Manhattan that are now staying, shall we say, in suburbia to do shopping since the pandemic. And I think it's taking its toll in downtown. Are you seeing any difference in your Manhattan store in terms of volume this time of year than you have in the past?
I think with a physical store is like you see the volume always increase because there's more people finding out about your store every day. So we've saw an increase in Manhattan, which gave us the financing to open Brooklyn, if you want. But what we see is that it's very uneven. So there's days where we're going to make a lot of money, and there's days that it's completely dead, where we expected to have more traffic. So we never know. Like, so sometime on a Monday can be extremely good. Sometime a Monday could be completely dead. It depends on the weather. It's like we don't know how to predict it, but for sure in New York, the summer season, it's much better than the month of Jan and February, where you have almost no tourists. And I would say 50% of our sales in Manhattan is tourists, but I feel in Brooklyn, most of our sales will be local people because there's a lot more apartment around the store. So I would say that's the difference. And we realized in Williamsburg that every single company that have a great online presence, some of these companies only have shops in Williamsburg. So they don't have shop, let's say, in New York, but they will open a small shop to represent their brand in Williamsburg. So that's when we saw this coming, this trend. That's why we wanted to be in the area.
Have you changed strategy at all now that you've opened the second store? Is the focus still the same? Like, you said you're looking for a third store, but somewhere else in the US. Like, what's the near future now? Is it focusing on Brooklyn? Is it looking for a third store, or is it ultimately just trying to drive everything to as much online sales and getting as much exposure as possible?
Yeah, so our online sales and retail sales, like in store versus online, it's 50-50. So for sure, our goal would be to have higher online sales, but people need to discover us first. So the store are there for people to discover us and feel confident to order online after. So if we can raise the amount of online sales, so for example, this month, we got a lot more online sales than last year versus the store. So this month we're maybe at 60 and 40% in store. So the goal is to find maybe another city in the US where we can get known and gain online sale in this region at the same time. So they really work end in end. And also we just like yesterday, we decided to open shipping in Brooklyn. At first we were like, oh, they won't do online shipping. But then we realized, okay, there's a lot of product also there that we could be shipping online. So these store, when it's more quiet, they also serve as like mini fulfillment center. So instead of opening a new warehouse in the US, now I have two mini warehouses with people that can do online shipping within the US market. And like the shipping is cheaper when it's inside the US. So instead of leaving from Canada, going into the US, when you have like a fulfillment center in the US to ship, it's much more affordable. So that's also how we're using the store.
Great. And are you discussing Los Angeles as that next possible location? Is it assumed, or are you thinking, well, maybe do we do a zigzag and try something somewhere else?
So it's our third market, LA. So when we look at our stat, I think number one, it's New York because of the physical store. Then it was Brooklyn. And then the third one was LA. And then I think the fourth one was San Francisco. So I went to visit both last year. But we're wondering, like, should we stay in a four-season market? Because we make winter boots, we make product for like all four season, which is not all the brands that do that. So I'm like, should I go to cities like Chicago or Boston that have a similar weather than Montreal, Toronto, and New York? So that's what we're thinking. But we for sure have more customers in LA than Chicago and Boston. So we're trying to see, and I think we're going to test it with pop-up in 2025 to see where our product is more appealing for customers.
2024 Canadian Fashion Award winners as the best accessory designers in the country, correct?
Yeah,
Congratulations.
It happened in October and we're really proud of it.
Excellent. And you work with your sister as well. Tell me about the relationship between you and Romy. How do you get along? How do you solve disputes when they happen?
Well, we're very different. So we have very different skill set. We don't work in the same area of the company. So I do mostly the design because I'm a trained footwear designer. So I do the design, I manage the factories, and I do the financing and the business development, so opening new store. So I'm more like specialized in fashion and footwear, and my sister does all the rest. So she does marketing. She has a background in communication and marketing. So the marketing team is a pretty focal point in our company because we sell online and it's pretty important. So she leads the marketing team, operation, and then HR is also something pretty important that she take care of. So because we have very different skill sets, we never kind of it's more when she's not there. She went on 2 maternity leave and I could really feel that she was missing. So I feel like for me, it's more difficult when she's not there than when she's there working with me. I think it's better for the brand when she's there. So we don't really have like big conflict, I would say.
And looking at the trends now on your website, fair to say loafers are in?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Every time we bring in loafers, they sell out in a few days. So we need to work on like better stocking our loafers because they've been selling out pretty quickly.
And lastly, Mike, we should mention the finance minister, now outgoing finance minister, did come up on the show earlier today. Not the best of circumstances, but for your circumstances, Myriam, she did provide you with a lot of exposure as you were the designer of the famous budget shoes last year, or this year rather.
And she asked me if I was happy with the CETA agreement. So it's the agreement where there's no duties in between the European Union and Canada. And for us, without this agreement, our product would be much more expensive for the customers. So because we're not paying duties, we're also giving a more affordable prices to our customers. So I hope this agreement stands. And I was able to thank her for negotiating this for us because I started the business before this was happening. And when I found out there was no more duty, it changed everything for us.
What's your feeling right now with I guess, the rumors between Mr. Trump and Canada in terms of the 25% tariff threats that are going on? Obviously, it kind of negates some of that, tariff-free Europe-Canada scenario if you're going to have to pay 25 going into the US.
Yeah, I mean, what helps us right now is the US dollar is pretty high, and we're bringing back this US dollar in Canada. So that allowed us to finance our operation in Canada and keep the price lower for Canadian. I feel if tariff comes in place, I might have to relook at all my prices. So we're hoping to the best because the CETA agreement There's some people in the European Union that are also talking about removing it. So there's like threats coming from every side, I would say, and we just have to stay focused and not panic. Also, I one of my good friend works in the Canadian consulate in New York, and she said, like, don't panic until it happens, because it's also all part of a negotiation game. So it might not be as worse as we think it is. So we just have to wait. And in any case, we're well established now in the two countries. So that give us a bit of opportunity to like move product around and see where is the best place to go. Because if I didn't have volume in the US and now I have to import all my product in the US, then that would be a bit more scary. But because we have a certain volume now with two stores, it helps us to either import the goods directly to the US or import them through Canada and pass them through the borders. So it gives us different options.
And I heard two words in there that we've had many discussions on. The first and foremost is keeping focus from an entrepreneurial standpoint. Is don't get caught up in the politics. Don't get caught up in anything until such time as we know what's going through. And the second is Myriam's comment on the consulate, and that's part of the negotiation game. So we've brought that up on many occasions. So before all the entrepreneurs run for the hills, let's stick to what we do best, which is the focus on the business that we're doing, and be as efficient as possible. And then from there, look, you need to adapt. It's not like we haven't adapted around a cross-border market or a foreign exchange problem in the past.
Yeah, for sure.
And Myriam, on the show, we ask you for your one piece of advice to inspire entrepreneurs before you leave, if you don't mind. And I'm just going to play what you told us last time, and you tell me if it still holds up.
So I would say my one piece of advice is go work before starting a business, gain experience before starting a business, because in the actual startup culture, there's a lot of pressure for like young people to be successful before the age of 30 or being a millionaire before the age of 30. But like that may not happen if you don't have experience. So I feel like I had friends that started company when we finished university, and I worked for 10 years before starting my business. And at the end, in a year or two, I was able to catch up with these people. So I feel sometimes it's not about, you shouldn't care about your age, and by this age I reached this milestone. I think this is all really toxic for entrepreneur. And I feel like you should get some experience, at least 2-3 years, just to know in your area what is working, what is not working. You can avoid mistake. You can do mistake at other people's cost. So do all of that so that when you start your business, you have the confidence also to sell your business, to talk to investors. It takes a lot of confidence on a daily basis to run a business. And I feel like if you get a bit of experience, you will have this confidence to follow through your business.
Okay, there you have it. What do you think? And do you still feel the same?
Yeah, I think I still feel the same. And especially also to run an HR department. There's right now in my sphere in fashion, there's a young entrepreneur that has this huge company. She's in her early 20s, and there was claim of her mistreating employees and things like that. And I just felt like she's just really young and she never worked before. So she probably made this mistake because she had no clue how to manage a team of people. So by also being exposed to different type of leadership, I think that really helps when you start a business. And my boyfriend is turning 40 next month, and he's talking about starting a business, and he's wondering if it's too late. And I told him it's not too late, and he should just go for it at 40, 50, 60. I think it's never late. I think some big companies were started by people in their mid 50s. So I think we should keep that in mind.
Passion and execution know no age.
Yeah.
Myriam Maguire, CEO, co-founder of Maguire Shoes. Excellent year. Myriam, thanks so much, and a better 2025 to you.
Thank you to you too, guys.
Thank you.
And there you have it, Mike, our retail spectacular. Thanks very much to Dax Dasilva of Lightspeed and Myriam Maguire of Maguire Shoes, two Canadians really shining on the international scene and down south.
Very impressive. Continue to see the positivity in retail, and all the best to all our listeners, regardless of what you celebrate and what you enjoy. Again, this is all about bringing people together and family, and take the time to recharge the batteries as we go into 2025. And remember that we live in a world that lacks love and compassion, and the more we can bring every day, whether that's to our own family or to our neighbors, now is the time that we need to at least remind ourselves. Sometimes we need the impetus of an external force to remind us that the world needs positivity. So this is the time of year to exude it. All the best to everyone.
Well said, Mike. Thank you. All the best to you and yours as well. Positivity and innovation. My wishes for 2025. So wishing all the entrepreneurs working this holiday season a Merry Grindmas, and do subscribe and stay with us here on the podcast on iHeart, Spotify, Apple, wherever you find your podcasts, because we're going to continue into the new year, doubling down in the online podcast format so we can bring you more stories and more inspiration and more wisdom to help propel lots of different entrepreneurs, hopefully to the next level. And so that's our goal for the new year. We have to take a break, retool, refocus, and then we'll talk in just a few weeks.
Think Big. TNKR Media. Good talk.